It's more than just a compass. For 90 years, the Royal Canadian Geographical Society has been making Canada better known to Canadians and to the world. The Royal Canadian Geographical Society's Compass Rose doesn't simply guide us in the cardinal directions. It directs us to explore the values we all share. We are celebrating this nation's natural and cultural heritage and exploring its farthest reaches. We are ensuring an awareness of the past, the challenges of the present, and the opportunities of the future. We are arming new generations with the knowledge they need to become the changemakers of tomorrow. We are charting Canada's future.
Aboshtit. My name is Charlene Bearhead, and I'm the Director of Reconciliation with Canadian Geographic. Welcome to this really exciting announcement about an incredible contribution that Husky is making to schools across Saskatchewan. I'm so happy to have you here joining us from wherever you are in your homes across the country. I'm joining you from my home here in Treaty 6 territory, and I can't wait to tell you what's been happening. Okay, well, actually, it won't be me giving you the lowdown. We've got way cooler people to listen to. You'll be hearing messages from people like the Minister of Heritage, Roberta Jameson, CEO of Inspire, and of course, Janet Ansley from Husky, who's making this really incredible gift. We're also actually going to see reconciliation education in action with some incredible ally educators and students from Saskatchewan. Right after that, I'll meet you back here or somewhere close by and talk to you more about the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada and answer your questions. So let's head inside and see what they have to say. Don't forget your mask and stay 6 feet apart.
Bonjour à tous. Hello, everyone. I'm joining you from Gatineau, under traditional territory of the Algonquins. Did you know that Michif is not the only ancestral language of the Métis, and that the name Saskatoon comes from the Cree word for small red fruit? Il y a tant de choses à découvrir sur les langues et les cultures des Premières Nations, des Inuits et des Métis. Alors, je suis très content que l'Atlas des peuples autochtones du Canada, avec ses modules en ligne et sa carte géante, soit partagé à plus grande échelle avec les jeunes de la Saskatchewan. The Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada is a powerful educational tool, and our government is delighted to have supported it as Canada 150 Legacy Project and a way to continue together on the path of reconciliation. I would like to thank all the partners who created this atlas and are making sure more people can benefit from it. Merci. Ninan Skumitin, merci. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm pleased to join our partners to share our appreciation for this generous donation from Husky Energy. Every high school student in this province will now have access to the Royal Canadian Geographical Society's Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada in their local school. The Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada supports our province's commitment to treaty education. 2020 marks the 12th anniversary of treaty education being mandatory for all students in Saskatchewan. This atlas and its accompanying resources will enhance our supports for our teachers and for our students. For students who are learning remotely during this time, a free online version will also be available. This informative and interactive resource will soon be delivered to every provincial, independent, and First Nations high school in Saskatchewan. This resource supports our students by creating an equitable and inclusive education system that benefits all our learners. Resources such as this help students become engaged citizens who understand and appreciate diverse beliefs, languages, and practices. Once again, thank you to Husky Energy for this generous donation that will benefit our young people. It will support the continued learning about the legacy of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in this country. Thank you for watching, and please enjoy the rest of the program.
Sego, My name's Roberta Jameson. I'm the president and CEO of Inspire, and I am proud to applaud Husky Energy's initiative in supporting the distribution of the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada to so many schools throughout Saskatchewan. You know, this atlas that we at Inspire were proud to partner on, it came out of a recommendation from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And what a great initiative to share with all Canadian children the history of Canada through the eyes of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. This is part of Canada's identity, and I'm just simply delighted that educators, students, and parents alike will have access to this invaluable tool. Nyawagoa, thank you, Husky Energy.
Hello, I'm Janet Vansley, Senior Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Human Resources at Husky Energy. The important role and long history of Indigenous people in this country is a story that has not traditionally been well told, well shared, or properly included in Canada's education system. But the good news for students today is that people are working hard to change all of that. New collaborations between Indigenous peoples and educators, such as the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, are creating unprecedented tools, such as the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada. These important new tools increase understanding of Canada's rich Indigenous history, which helps us all better understand and work in our world today. For companies like Husky, it's of increasing importance that our relationships with Indigenous communities are respectful and advance the right to self-determination, which we actively support through education and economic development. Our support of the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada is just one way we provide access to the resources to explore who we are, where we've been, and our shared journey towards reconciliation. We can learn some hard truths about our colonial past and present, and the challenges that remain in addressing and repairing these historical injustices. We are greatly honored to be a contributing partner to this program by providing a copy of the Atlas and to the online learning resources. Thank you for helping us share this story.
Hi, I'm John Guy, your Chief Executive Officer of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and Canadian Geographic. I'm speaking to you from my home in Toronto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. In 2017, the Society and Canadian Geographic partnered with the Assembly of First Nations, Inuit, Tapirit, Kanatami, the Métis National Council, Inspire, and the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation to produce the groundbreaking Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada. The Atlas tells the stories of Canada's Indigenous peoples in ways that have never been heard before. These stories go back many thousands of years. As the country's preeminent geographical organization, we are very proud that the Atlas has given us the opportunity to help Canadians better understand this history. It changed the narrative in respect to our organization, and it will have an enormous impact in classrooms across Canada. That's why we are incredibly grateful today to Husky Energy's support in facilitating a gift atlas for every high school in Saskatchewan. This is a massive step forward on the path to reconciliation for these provinces and indeed Canada as a whole. The Society is honored to be a part of it.
The Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada giant floor map is the perfect starting point to learn more and work toward reconciliation. The teacher resource was written by an incredible group of educators, and the teacher's guide is accompanied by cards and materials to support each section.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Angelica, and I am the digital editor right now for Canadian Geographic. I am speaking to you today. I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Algonquin, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat peoples. And if you're curious about where you're joining us today from, you can head on to a handy little app that we've created here at CanGeo, and it's the Indigenous Peoples of Atlas companion app. And I would thrilled to introduce Charlene Bearhead. Charlene is Canadian Geographic's Director of Reconciliation. And Charlene is here today to talk to us all about the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada and to take your questions. So if you have any questions about the Atlas as Charlene talks or in general, please make sure you drop those in the comments or the chat section of wherever you're joining us today from. We will be happy to answer them as soon as Charlene is done her presentation. Charlene, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Angelica. Hi, everyone. I don't know where you're at, but as you saw when I introduced, it was a little bit chilly outside. So I decided to stay inside to rejoin you after watching that awesome video. It was really fantastic. And I just want to say thank you to the teachers and the students who shared some of their video footage about the really great engagement that they've already had. So I just want to tell you a little bit more, and I just want to thank John Geiger. He did a really great job, as you saw in his section in the video, about talking a little bit about the history. But when I became involved with the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada, it was really exciting to me, as having been the first education lead at the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation and having coordinated the education days and events for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I was so excited that Canadian Geographic chose what I would call Canada 150 plus 10,000 as their project, and really decided to honor and shed light on not only the past 150 years of the history in this country, but from time immemorial, and to really do it well and in a good way and in a respectful way, by having those stories and those experiences and that knowledge shared by the Indigenous people themselves, by the knowledge keepers and the descendants of, and the knowledge keepers now. And so it was really a gift to get to be a small part of that process. And as John said, and you heard him speak to in his video piece, that it was a collaboration between Canadian Geographic, the Assembly of First Nations, the Inuit Tipiriat Kanatami, and Métis National Council, and CTR, as well as Inspire. So a fantastic group of people within those organizations to guide that process. And you'll see, and of course, I'm sure you have your Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada with you. I always have mine here with me in my home. But I think that one of the things that's really intriguing is that when you can open any one of those volumes, and you'll see that it wasn't Canadian Geographic saying, here's the framework. Inuit people, would you choose? And I just said that wrong, and I have to correct myself, because when I say Inuit people, I'm saying people. So Canadian Geographic and the editorial team led by the amazing Erin Kiley didn't say, here's the framework, please fill it. I loved hearing Erin speak to how he managed this whole initiative, and that he said, I made one decision, and the decision was to always honor the voices of the Indigenous people, whichever nation, whichever group that was, and to just make sure that I was there to support that happening. And the result was beautiful, and it is beautiful, and it's so relevant. So if you take a look at the Métis volume, you'll see that it's structured differently than the Inuit volume, which is structured differently than the First Nation volume, as it should be. And so the organizations themselves decided what that should look like, what should be in there, how should that be structured. And you see the volumes, they're this thick. They could fill this room. But the idea isn't that Canadian Geographic would gather everything that you ever needed to know about the Inuit communities, or about the many different First Nations in this country, or about the Métis and their different communities and their teachings. That wasn't the idea, because none of us could live long enough to learn all of the things that we need to learn from the Indigenous people, not only of the territories where we live. I mentioned that I live here in Treaty 6 territory, which is shared Cree, Nakota, Dene, Métis territory. But it's this incredible beginning. It's this compilation of really 2 pages of insight. So I just flipped open, and here we are at the 1885 Northwest Resistance within the Métis volume. And so there are 2 pages, and the information contained there is the information that the Métis National Council and the people that they reached out to and the contributors from communities across the country decided this is the most important information that we could share with you now. This is what we will share with you to inspire you to learn more, to build those relationships, to learn, and that we can learn from one another. So it was just an incredible process. And yeah, it would not surprise you to know that the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada was a #1 bestseller before it ever actually hit the shelves. And it continues to be so relevant. And as we hear today, that Husky has so generously recognized that every school in Saskatchewan should have this, and every family, every household in the country. This gives us an opportunity for beginning learning that people that are old like me never had the benefit of. Most Canadians did not have the benefit of this type of learning in our education system. So it gives us a chance to continue to educate ourselves. So I talk about those voices and Aaron Kiley making that decision and saying, look, this is going to be all from Indigenous voice. And I use that term as a placeholder because it depends. Was that a Dene story? Was that an Abenaki story? Was that an experience from an Inuit from Nunavut, or was that from Nunatsiavut? All of those very unique families, communities, nations had the opportunity to share what they chose to be, the sort of need to know for now to get things started. And so in the end, of course, we know that when an Indigenous knowledge keeper, an Indigenous elder, a youth, a community member, when people share teachings with us, it's not that one person's voice. It's the teachings of their family and their community, and people go back to those who have guided them. And so we started to get the questions quite early. So how many people contributed? How many contributors are there to the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada? And when we started to look at the approximately 200 contributors that directly contributed and wrote, pieces and contributed photographs and family records and so on, and then the additional 200 plus educators, Indigenous and ally educators that helped to develop the resources, we realized that there were well over 2,000 Indigenous peoples from all of these different nations and communities that contributed to this incredible gift. And this is a gift. To me, there's no doubt that when I look at this, the fact that people have chosen to share their stories and their knowledge with me, with you, with everyone across the country, that's a precious gift that has not to date been available in this sort of one gathering place. And so we're really, really excited about that. And so if that isn't enough, that we have this incredible, beautiful, 4-volume set that you saw some images of earlier, and, the Inuit volume, just incredible. Then there's the whole piece that is, so there we have it. Thank you, Angelica. She's magic. So there's the images of the covers of the 4-volume set. Then we have this whole other education resource that was developed, as I said, by Indigenous and ally educators. That is the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada giant floor map. And there are 17 lesson plans that go with that. Absolutely the most in-depth education resource, education guide that's been developed yet by Canadian Geographic. And so that's available online. You can find the lessons online, but the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada that I know Angelica is finding an image of right now to share with us and bring up on the screen. There we go. There she is. Oh, look it. There I am. And here I am. You notice like the black and red thing? Must be a theme. So, and with the Minister of Heritage at the time, who was really intrigued. And in fact, I'll tell you a little story about this picture. So as we recall, the Minister of Heritage is from near Ganawagi in Ganawagi territory in Montreal. And I shared with her that in Treaty 6 territory, that's what we were discussing in this picture, where I live, there's Calahoo, which is a Mohawk. It was a Mohawk community. And And she saw the link on the giant floor map that in parentheses says Ganawagi. And she said, how is this possible? I'm from way over here, and it says it's Ganawagi connection. And so we shared a story that I will let you find when you engage with the giant floor map and the lessons. And there's that connection, because we need to remember that provincial and territorial boundaries and those very defined boundaries, that's a very Eurocentric concept. And that line in the sand, and that there's not enough for everyone and it's not shared, that's not an Indigenous way of knowing and being. So there's so much to learn just by being on the map. And it's been so incredible to watch not only Indigenous and non-Indigenous children on the map together, but adults, that as people come to the map, and I'm not going to tell you what isn't there that you're accustomed to, because you'll discover that, but you can see this really great aerial view that it's very unique. And so I've seen these really beautiful moments where I think this one in particular was at the Library of Parliament, and there was a young woman from Nunavut who had been, really quiet and humbly engaged over the weekend, not really outspoken, and that people were gathered around her, and she was teaching people how to find their way on this map. And it was the first time she'd been on it, but it made sense. And so this giant floor map, again, like the 4-volume set, it's not the all end all, and it's going to teach you everything. But Chris Brackley, who is an absolutely incredible cartographer, who took all of these layers that all of the contributing educators, and when I say educators, some people have teaching degrees and some people do not. But we know that teachers and educators and some of our most powerful teachers are those elders and knowledge keepers in community. But when people came onto that map for the first time with Chris, it was really powerful and very emotional. And I remember Chris saying, this has transformed my practice as a cartographer. It'll never be the same because of the teachings that he received. And to see the elders and the knowledge keepers so deeply moved by the fact that finally what they had shared had been heard. It had not been adapted, it had not been altered, it had not been made to fit into a colonial structure, but it had been interpreted onto this map. And then these lesson plans that were co-developed by all of these incredible educators, really, really powerful. So you can see lessons about climate change. It might be about governance. It could be about land use. There's lessons around Indigenous languages. There's lessons around treaties and land agreements and land disputes. You'll see some original place names and find that I love the example of where we now, what people refer to as Jasper. And it's a well-known place because it's visited widely by tourists from not only across Canada, but around the world. But that there are actually 11 different First Nations that have long-standing, very deep ties to that place and that space, and which means that there are 11 different names for that place in different Indigenous languages, and depending on the time of year or ceremony or gathering or harvesting or whatever the case might be. But that there are ways, I guess what you would call rules of engagement. There were diplomatic agreements between nations about how that space and different spaces around the land on Turtle Island were used. So gives you some really great starting points. But what we've been most excited about is we have to remember that this is across Turtle Island. There's no such thing as the Indigenous way. Indigenous is not a culture, it's not a heritage. Algonquin is a heritage. Mohawk is a heritage. Seneca is a heritage. Lakota is a heritage, is a nation. And so the teachings are unique. And even within the nations, there are the communities, there are the societies, there's so much. But that we hope, and we have been really excited to see, that when teachers and their students start to engage with the giant floor map, use the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada as a starting point, start to engage with those lessons, they're inspired to reach out further and build those relationships and seek knowledge in every area: Indigenous science, Indigenous wellness, math and measuring and song and story and everything, Indigenous laws. It is not possible for there to be anything that we could learn in schools in a curricular area that doesn't have the context of the people of the territory. And so it makes the learning so much richer because we bring all of that learning together and we can learn from one another. We don't need to be, in this particular case where I live, I don't need to be Cree or Nakota to need to know how to live in a good way with the land so that we protect the land, the water. All of our children need clean drinking water. All of our children need clean air. We all need the plants and the medicines and the herbs and the trees, and we need one another. And that's what this is all about. So you are invited, and we are excited to lend you. You're invited to borrow one of the giant floor maps with the education kits that goes with that. And I know Angelica is getting ready to show you Michelle Chaput, our Director of Education, who is an amazing, amazing young woman. You can email her, or there you go. You can go to info@canadiangeographic.ca to book or purchase one of the maps. When we talked about the map, we asked for could we get a cost of what it would cost for school districts, schools, universities, libraries, community organizations to purchase the maps. And some people thought, well, I don't know if we'll get a lot. We have sold almost 100, provided the maps for purchase, and it's been really exciting. And in the way Husky has made this really generous gift to the high schools in Saskatchewan today, there have been businesses and organizations across the country that have seen the benefit, and their gesture of reconciliation, their response to the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada has been to purchase the giant floor maps and education resources that go with that for their local school, their local school district. Faculties of education and universities have purchased them. Teachers Association, federations, unions have purchased them so that they can share them and then also start to develop their own resources around that. So it's really very, very exciting. We really encourage you to look online. Angelica talked about the app that you can put on your phone so that wherever you are, quickly you can look up the location and you can see whose territory you're on, how you should acknowledge that in a good way and in a respectful way that you're a visitor in the territory. That's always really important for us to do. But also, if you are a person that's an original member of that nations of that territory, there's a place where you can go on and see it and say, is that accurate? Is that the way we would acknowledge it? And it says, do you see a problem? Please let us know. And so we really welcome and invite your input to say, actually, we would prefer if you acknowledge this, or we've taken back and reclaimed our own name, our traditional name in our language, and we would like you to use that. That's what this is about. This is not about the Royal Canadian Geographical Society telling the history of Indigenous people for Indigenous people. It's about us coming together and using the incredible capacity and integrity and history and skill that the team members that I am so grateful to now call my own colleagues at Canadian Geographic can bring to help support in a way that they have been guided and directed and invited to do by the Indigenous peoples in the many, many nations and communities in this country. So as you can see, when I start talking about this, I just can't stop because it's so exciting, but I'm going to make myself stop because I really want to hear from you. And I'd be happy to answer any of the questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Charlene. First, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to us about the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada. We really appreciate you walking us through the process. And on that note, my first question that comes from one of our CanGeo education team members, her name is Dominique, and she wants to know what the process was like when it came to gathering stories and knowledge from these knowledge keepers and transferring that into the Atlas form.
So for me to observe that was really incredible because, I mean, let's think about what our name is, the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, which could lead people to believe that it's a very colonial organization. And yet there we were in that collaboration. We talked about it. So the Assembly of First Nations and some of their knowledge keepers and guides and elders determined how they should reach out. And it was really incredible. I remember very distinctly sitting in Banff in shared Blackfoot, Nakota, Tsuut'ina territory, the first time we brought together all of the educators that were going to contribute to the giant floor map and the education guide, and sitting with the education team at the time and teaching people how to make tobacco ties, because they knew and they'd learned that they needed to make an offering in a good way. And so that was the process in the territory. And so what was really beautiful, and to me makes us know that it's very authentic, is that it wasn't somebody Googling, how do I reach out to an Indigenous knowledge keeper or elder or community member, but to follow the processes that the Inuit Tipiriat Kanatami have. And they're very clear about their voice, their stories, their people, and they're the experts. They're the ones who know how to do that. And so to see the Canadian Geographic team do that work and to learn that, and to learn that it's different in different communities and in different families and different clans, and to follow that in a good way. So it would take us 4 volumes to explain all the different protocols and processes that happened, but I can assure you that they were done in a way that was done from a place of integrity and from a place of humility, and was done differently in each case to make sure that we honored the practices and the protocols of the people who were making the contributions.
I guess along those lines, another question is, how can teachers, non-Indigenous teachers, use this resource to teach the material in a respectful and conscientious manner, recognizing, of course, all of our history?
So I have a good friend from Muscatcheese. Her name is Angie Lightning, and she lives up in Calling Lake and does a lot of work with youth there. And I love an expression that she has. She often talks about being there just to hand out the confidence. And I feel like the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada, the 4-volume set itself, along with the giant floor map and the education guide, is a way that we can be handing out the confidence on behalf of all of the contributors to non-Indigenous teachers. It gives, I've often heard, elders and knowledge keepers that are working in schools assuring non-Indigenous teachers to say, I taught you this for a reason. I can't be here every time. I didn't teach you this so that I would have to run in here every time you were going to share this. We're not asking people to teach, cultural protocol or ceremony. I don't have the right to do that. And not every member of every nation has the right to do that. But we have a responsibility to teach truth. And the truth is that there have been systems of science and law and governance and everything that you can think of on these lands from the very beginning of time. And so this is a very good beginning point to hand out that confidence so that non-Indigenous teachers can use these resources and know assuredly that not only are these teachings and this knowledge and these resources from trusted sources and people in community, but that they were sourced in an ethical and humble way. And I think that gives teachers a lot of confidence, and it also gives them opportunities to think about what other teachings and what other knowledge their students need and how to start to do that process themselves.
Now, of course, we are Canadian Geographic and we are well known for our maps. We have a question on Instagram from one of our Instagram followers, and they want to know what kind of maps are in the Atlas.
Well, there are many maps in the Atlas, like throughout the Atlas, but if you take a look at the volume that is this one, there are residential school survivor stories, but there are also, so half of the map is dedicated there, of that volume, and then half of it is dedicated to all of these different maps. So I said earlier that there are many different types of maps. So there are some maps that talk about treaty lines and treaty territories. There are some aspects of the mapping that are about unresolved land claims. There are components of the map to show where residential schools are situated. There are components of maps, and there are maps to show where different Indigenous languages are. There are maps that reflect results of climate change and how the ice, for example, in the Arctic, and how that's changing, and how that then impacts the lives of the people living there. So there's the maps within the 4-volume set, but then also on the giant floor map, which you can also download, and there's a tiled version of that. You need a lot of paper for that. But so you see the layers of all of that as well, because those are not, again, those boundaries are not those sort of Eurocentric, very cut and dry boundaries. But yeah, layers and layers and layers of knowledge in maps. And again, there are some maps that have been drawn on historically, and then there are some of the incredible and original work that Chris Brackley has done.
I'm just putting at the bottom of our screen here the website where you can actually go on and you can kind of dive into each of the sections a little bit. So Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada.ca, and you can see some of the stories and some of the knowledge and also some of the maps in each section before you click the purchase button and get led to your purchase. So that's a good resource as well, that website. Also on Instagram, we had a question, Charlene. What do we have to do to get these maps and these atlases in every school in Canada? Because that's where they deserve to be. That's what somebody told us on Instagram.
Yay, I love that person. Whoever you are onto it. You've got it. And it's so true. And not because I work for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society right now, because I'll tell you that all the work that I did on this particular initiative was before I came here, and it was on a volunteer basis. Because this is so, so, so important. But this is what you need to do. If you know, so for example, here today, we're here celebrating the fact that Husky purchased the 4-volume set for every high school in Saskatchewan. Other organizations need to step up. I mean, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission issued 94 calls to action 5 years ago now. And they did their work. They did their time. The 3 commissioners, the thousands of survivors that courageously shared their stories, so that in hopes that Canadians would learn, and people have started to do that. In Alberta, a couple of years ago, the government of the day purchased the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada for every junior, senior high school in the province. I know there's another announcement coming up soon further in the east that I'm not going to talk about right now. But organizations, church groups, community groups, businesses, corporations, industries, it's a tiny drop in the bucket that has huge, huge potential. So we do need to get these in every school. So that's what people need to do. What Husky did today is step up and say, we're going to purchase these for this region. We're going to buy giant floor maps for our school district. We're going to buy a giant floor map. You know, our church is going to get one for the schools in our town. That's what it, you know, things don't magically fall out of the sky. We know that. It takes hard work. And I really appreciate that question, because if we all do our little part, if every person that's joining us here today, if every person that's had some sort of a connection knows somebody somewhere that can come together and make this happen, gift it. I know that even before we hit the shelves, I had a request from someone that I knew that this was happening and said, we have a wedding this summer and I want this to be the wedding gift. How do I get a copy? And actually we found a copy, because what we found out that the couple that was getting married, the husband was the son of a survivor. And so our team at Canadian Geographic found a way to get them a set before it was released, and that was a wedding gift. Yeah, let's just all do our part and get in there and make sure that every person in this country has the opportunity to learn the things that we didn't in school, and that the children today do.
Along those lines, Charlene, of all doing our part, how does this resource help Canada move forward towards reconciliation?
You know, I've again, I feel really blessed to have been able to witness some of these things, but I've seen people really turn around, from the very sort of racist, I'm going to say redneck because of where I live, attitudes that, Indigenous people get everything free, they do this, they do that. People don't even understand that we all have treaty rights, that we are all members of a treaty if we live in a treaty territory. And that those of us who do not have First Nation status, our treaty rights are so well intact that we don't even have to know we have them. They just magically happen for us. Where people who are on the First Nation side of that treaty have to, fight and lobby and educate every single day just to have their treaty rights even acknowledged, never mind honored. So I feel like one of the things that's huge is there are so many people that can appear to us at times to be really racist or really ignorant or really, negative, and it's because they didn't ever have the benefit of this knowledge, but they do now. And, from the time of the TRC and beyond, and organizations like Canadian Geographic that have taken this on and said, we're going to get this right now, we're going to do the best we can, and we know we might make mistakes, but we're going to keep at it until we continue to get that right. I think that this, the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada is a really great starting point, and it's really helping to open people's eyes and for people to understand that there's so much more that we don't know and that we need to know more so that we can speak to these issues and have conversations in the way that reflects that we are knowledgeable and that we are actually coming from a place of knowledge and truth and humility and openness, as opposed to thinking that we know everything, and we don't.
You touched on it a little bit, Charlene, but Kasim Morali, who's watching on YouTube right now, we talked about how amazing of an educational resource this atlas is and the giant floor map is. But Kasim wants to know, how can we use it in our day-to-day, in our personal lives? I'm not a student anymore, so what value is the atlas to people outside of the education field?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I did touch on that, but thanks for asking for some clarity. So I'll just share something that one of my elders shared with me a long time ago when I got sort of upset with myself because I was really annoyed about a particular situation and said, why do I let this get to me? I'm educated, I should know better. And she was just so calmly, in the way that she always did, said, Charlene, the Creator put us on this earth to learn. That is our journey. That is she said, white people call it education or school, but it's so much beyond that. And the day that you have learned everything that you were put on this earth to learn is the day the Creator is going to call us home. That's what we call graduation, the day that we're called home. And so I would say that is exactly, kids in schools right now are, for the most part, getting so much more than we got in terms of education around residential schools, around treaties, around the different nations and communities, around, Inuit, around Métis history, all of that. But anyone who, since 2017, really, when this atlas came out, and from the time of the TRC, which is the majority of the country that won't ever step into a classroom again, that isn't in school now, that isn't in university, this is the opportunity. This is the beginning of that. This is the way. And so there you go. I mean, as I said earlier, it is certainly not the all end all, but where else do you find all 4 volumes in one space where you can find the teachings and the knowledge that, again, as I said, Assembly First Nations, Inuit Kanatami, Métis National Council, supported by Inspire. Where else are you going to find all of that in one place to start with? And we're really clear that it's a starting point, so that you really can start to learn what you don't know, because we all know that saying, you don't know what you don't know, but where do you find out what you don't know? And I would say this is a spectacular starting point to find out what you don't know.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Charlene. It looks like that's all of the questions that have come in for us, but I think we've pretty much covered all of our bases here. I do also want to just mention that there are a number of emails that I've gotten while we've been talking and a few comments happening in the chat about potential future partnerships and great ideas for how to include the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada in the digital realm. So I am super excited to chat with all of those people. So I'm going to put my email address in the chat. And if you would like to follow up on any of your ideas, or if you have any questions for Charlene or another member of our team that we didn't answer today, I'm sure Charlene will happily field emails from me for the next little while so we can make sure that those questions get answered. Charlene, is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up today?
No, I just want to say again, thank you to everyone that's joining us. I want to again really raise my hands and offer a deep offering of gratitude to all of the people that contributed, to all of the non-Indigenous people that are finding the courage to pick this up and admit that they need to know more. I want to say a big thanks to Peggy and Joseph and Mission School District for offering us some video footage and helping to support all of that. Huge thanks to Husky. And I'm going to thank in advance all of the other organizations and industries and businesses that I know are going to step up and follow the lead of Husky and make sure that every school in this country, every teacher in every elementary school, every high school student that has access to these incredible learning resources. And I too am really excited about where we're going next, because we know that this is just a start and there's so much more to build on this. So with that, Ishnish Pinamat, thank you from deep in my heart, and I'll see you down the path.